All right, welcome back. Happy Friday. Our first guest tonight from halfway around the world, Bernard Grover, the number one investigator of the Q phenomenon, and he has written some marvelous essays and articles about this for a long time. Hello, Bernard. The story that you have most recently written is another good one. Let's update, and I must say I've seen a couple of references to Q in the media in the last couple of days that were not mockery. They were kind of talking about Q as if Q was some kind of a quasi-credible platform that should be paid attention to, that was commanding some real deserved interest, if not respect, but interest. Is there a movement in the MSM to give Q some kind of credibility now that we haven't seen before?
Well, there definitely seems to be a change in strategy. They've tried for the better part of a year to just dismiss it as a conspiracy theory, and that doesn't seem to be working. It's not going away. So now they're going to give it a little bit of credibility and try to detour this Q movement into something that they can control.
Huh. All right.
Yeah. Q is a force. You have to admit that. If you look at the subscriber numbers on the commentary channels,
what are they now?
Well, one of the ones that I follow is pushing 250,000. Several of them are around 100,000 plus, and the X22 report, a guy you know, he's up around 500,000 now.
Dave is
almost everything they do. Yeah,
and he's really he's go ahead.
Well, almost everything they do is Q centric. So this is all Q related news, and everything is focused on. What does Q tell us, and how do we apply that to our lives?
He's really gotten into it then. I didn't know this. I know Dave, and of course he used to be on the network here for a long time. Great mind. Mm-hmm. So he's fully on board. Interesting.
Yeah, I would classify him as a true believer because he does not present any alternative views. He's strictly, Q is it. Q is telling us the truth. And we have to believe Q because Q is Donald Trump. There is a definite equation of equality here between the two.
Well, okay.
Trump is called Q+. There are Q drops that are signed by an entity called Q+, and within the Q-universe, that is considered Donald Trump himself.
Really?
Yes.
Now, I had a report the other day from somebody that knows somebody that's connected to the administration, and the report is that any briefing Trump has been given, only about 15% of it will stick. He just doesn't have the ability to acquire, synthesize, and work with data because he can't hold it. It just drifts away or it doesn't register. That's the inside word. Could be a BS. I don't know. And then there's another story out today. Is Trump playing 4D chess with, I forget what it was, but they're giving him a lot of credit here as being some kind of a master tactician. And I don't see it. Never have.
Well, I've always seen Trump as a very, very big picture kind of guy. He just sits around and has ideas and then surrounds himself with people that make it happen. And admittedly, he's very good at it. I mean, you don't become a celebrity and at least a millionaire, if not a billionaire, being stupid. So I have to give him some credit for being intelligent.
Well,
whether he's this master genius that knows how to manipulate all these pieces to get whatever it is that he's after, I don't know. I
don't have the answer either. I wouldn't, on a bet, give him that much credit. I just don't. If nothing else, the lies and the deceit and all the rest of it taint whatever gifts he may have. In my book, I don't countenance it. Doesn't work for me. You got to be straight, and he's not straight. So now your latest piece. I don't
get that impression.
No, your latest piece is called "The Killer Q," spelled Q-I-L-L-E-R. The Killer Q. What's killer about Q?
Well, if you recall back August last year, a year ago, when John McCain died, 26 August 2018, it was widely viewed in the Quniverse that Q had predicted the exact date up to the minute when John McCain would die, up to 30 days ahead.
I remember.
In other words, at the end of July. And I did an analysis at that point. I forget the name of it now. It was the Q prophecy, where I analyzed that. And if Q indeed was able to predict his death to the moment from brain cancer, then either John McCain had planned to commit suicide and somehow had let it be known, or Q was involved in executing him. And there are many, many people, many of the Cuvians, who believe that McCain was tried by a military tribunal and put to death, in which case then Q would obviously have inside knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Now, based on that...
yeah, go ahead.
Well, based on that, we recently had the mass shootings in El Paso and Dayton. And Q put out drops that seemed to predict those mass shootings. In fact, giving 24-hour notice that something would happen, telling everybody, watch the news. There were a number of drops, and if you look at my article, I put screenshots of all of it up there.
Yeah.
So you can interpret it for yourself, but I'm putting it within the context, A, that Q is somehow related to the military, and B, that Q is, well, let's say it's somehow involved, that it is a real entity. We just don't know what it is.
It doesn't take much to really turn the media spotlight on Q. One hit, everybody remembers it. 50 losses, nobody cares. Nobody remembers it. On to the next prediction, on to the next inside leak. Now, it's certainly my view that one or both of these shootings was well known to various aspects of the geopolitical machine that runs this country. And it would not be difficult for that to be connected to Q or vice versa. And the information flows, and Q does some drops, and yeah, people easily connect the dots. Q knew. Q knew. Who knew? Q knew. Shootings. So I don't think it's going to be hard to keep this thing afloat if it's connected in the way that you're forecasting it is, the Q phenomenon. It's connected somewhere, somehow. I honestly believe that the government, that nothing happens in this country that's not surveilled, noticed, noted, or watched, or created. It's just that the control is that abject at this point, in my book. That's my opinion. So I'm not surprised.
And I echo that opinion, given the fact that the control system has been installed over centuries. This is nothing new. This is not. It hasn't been invented in the last 100 years. This is a long-term project by a group of people, and there are thousands of names for it. But let's just say there's a hidden elite that has been manipulating humanity for centuries, and this is just the latest iteration of it. And to my mind, Q is a highly sophisticated one, using technology and social media, but it is not new in the sense that we're not all of a sudden being controlled by some entity.
This is really important, what Bernard says. And all of you, you get it. The planning, the implementation of the control matrix is old, and it does go back centuries. And the technology now makes it relatively a cakewalk for the controllers to control. We are so controlled, it's pathetic. And looking at the big picture, as you mentioned earlier, is just something that the masses don't do. They have no interest in it, and even if they did, they think they're going to get their data from the mainstream media, by which they can do their reconnoitering and come to their conclusions. Never going to happen. The media did any of you see in the media any mention of the two, and there would have been a lot more if the lid hadn't come down so quickly, eyewitnesses who were inside the Walmart in El Paso who saw 3 or 4 black-clad shooters at work killing people? Did you hear that story anywhere? Not a chance. Even if it were unproven, even if it were completely speculative, you have 2 eyewitnesses who were in the Walmart. It was about a 15-year-old girl and looked like maybe a 35 to 40-ish Hispanic woman who had to speak with a translator, who absolutely said no, and she even waved her arm left and right to underscore what she was saying about the shooters with their weapons, spraying back and forth. She saw them, and it wasn't cruciferous. There were 3 or 4 others who went in another entrance. It's the same as Parkland, Mary Stoneman Carver, or whatever her name is, the Parkland High School shooting. And again, I repeat, how many of these shooters who aren't liquidated, which is the usual course of action, how many of them have you seen with that glazed look in their eye? And when they say something at all, it's usually, I don't remember anything, because they don't. And Crucia's father is a psychologist or psychiatrist working in a big hospital, a big mental type facility, obviously with government connections. I can't prove that. I'm just saying that all the indicators are there. Did he program his own allegedly autistic son? Maybe. People do things like that. The world isn't what it used to be. It's crazy and getting crazier. Go ahead, Bernard.
Well, I fully agree with you. And what's interesting to me as well is that the guy's last name, Crucius, in Latin means of the cross, which I keyed in on immediately because it fits in with a lot of the speculation I've done on Q being a quasi-religious movement. And that's a bold claim, but if you read my arguments, I think you find the conclusion unavoidable. In fact, what the Gospel According to Q is a good article to look at and see how I build this concept.
Look over on the left-hand side of at Rense News, and you'll see Bernard Grover. You'll see his columnist archive. All his articles are there or linked right to there. Let me say one other thing about the shooter and your mention of Crucius. That's interesting. And for those of you who have heard the term cruciferous vegetables, this is the same thing, talking about the cross. Cruciferous vegetables. Correct. So there you go. That's a good catch. Now the other one, today I heard, I think it was on the communist NPR broadcast, that they're absolutely certain now that Crucius, he drove a long distance, 600 miles or something, allegedly, to get to this Walmart, so he could specifically kill Hispanics. And that of the 22 dead and 30-something wounded, 56, 57 people, 8 of them were Hispanics. Huh? He drove 600 miles to kill Hispanics, and 8 of them out of the 22 dead were Hispanics. That's a pretty poor average when he is, in fact, half Spanish Hispanic himself. His mother's Hispanic. What's he going to go kill Hispanics for? And if he can't go into a Walmart and recognize Hispanic targets, and it gets even dumber. So the whole thing just another one of those stupid, inane, lone gunman charades that the media backs 100%. That's the sickening part of it. That's their job, and they do it. Go ahead.
Well, and I'm from Texas. I know you don't have to drive 600 miles to find a large number of Hispanics. He could have done it quite well in his own hometown. And really, this goes to part of my argument in Killer Q, using drops number 3550 and 3551. There was a series of coded messages that Q put out. This was 1 August, or July 30, July 30. And these were widely interpreted as being some kind of computer code given to the operator of the board. But I interpret it as activating sleeper agents, and either posting target numbers or specifying which sleeper they wanted activated. And I think if you read my argument, you'll see that it does conform to that interpretation. Now, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying that, I'm looking at the same thing everybody else is looking at, and I get a very different picture out of it.
Yeah. So this won't be the last, and they will continue the same drumbeat, and we've got enough communists on the loose now with the communist left-wing liberal media that we'll hear nothing but outrage. Of course, they'll never mention 45,000 Americans slaughtered each 12 months on our highways and byways. Not a word about that. Or 3 million wounded on the highways. They won't say anything about that. It's a tragedy when 22 or 30 are dead, but come on, look at the big picture. Yeah. The big picture.
Well, and what about the, I forget the name of the town now, Gaylord or Galen or something like that, California, the Garlic Festival shooting, almost vanished immediately. Nobody even talks about it anymore. The same day as the Dayton shooting, there was at least one mass shooting in Chicago, and that's vanished. The only two that are being focused on are El Paso and Dayton. And you have to wonder, to my reading, Q only activates 2 agents, or 2 targets. And the only 2 of the 4 shootings in 8 days, the only 2 that are being focused on are Texas and boy, there's a whole mess with that El Paso thing. The guy's manifesto was uploaded by somebody else the day after the shootings, and
it was certainly not the day after, but it was apparently minutes after. That's what I have.
Oh, was it minutes? Okay.
Yeah. It's supposedly couldn't have been done. Not to mention the fact that we do have a report that it's a good report. Somebody who lived right next door to him, basically his whole life, said the guy is autistic. He's in special ed. Mm-hmm. Right? So he's not going to write a manifesto like that. The parts, I didn't read the whole thing. The parts I read were extremely well written. They weren't just slop. And it smelled right away to me as this is a professional job. This is not just a throwaway piece. So I really hate to see Trump getting credit. Q things, fine. Have fun with Q. Don't tell me it's Trump. It's not Trump. Trump isn't in charge of anything. If he is, then you should be quintuply, that's 5 times, as outraged as I am about the border being given up to the invaders. He will not stop the invasion. He has full force of law under the Constitution, which, let me be the first to tell you if you can't figure it out, and I know you can, the Constitution overrules any Obama judges. So this excuse of an Obama judge stopped me is garbage. It's disgusting. He's just
and it goes back
refusing.
It goes back to my contention that Trump is really just the face man for what amounts to a faction of the mafia that runs the world. If you imagine, the mafia being a series of capos, the families,
Yeah.
and each one of them have their own competing agendas that overlap the others here and there. And where they agree, things move quite quickly. But where they don't agree, they get into gangland battles. And to my mind, Trump and Q and everything else is just one faction of this mafia. And they didn't like the way the other family was taking it. So they're trying to go a different direction. And I think it's to diffuse what Ron Paul's campaign in 2012 exposed, and that is that there are millions of disaffected and disenfranchised voters who constitute a very powerful bloc, and Ron Paul activated them. And the problem is you have to diffuse that. You have to channel it and get it away from your precious system. Otherwise, that kind of group will tear it down. They will destroy it. And
right.
Then you've got nothing. So really all Trump is and Trump's ilk are just a faction that has got scared by Ron Paul's campaign and decided, okay, we need to channel this energy and get them neutralized, which Q does. I mean, Q tells everybody, just sit back, eat popcorn, watch the show. All right, so don't do anything. We got it all handled. And people do it. They just sit there and go, okay, what a great show. We're going to sit back and just enjoy this. We won't take any action because Q has it under control. And boy, anybody that believes that is, you have got to examine your motivations here.
Here's another story. Where's the formal headline is Trump playing 4D chess with China. This is actually on Zero Hedge, written by Andrew, is this Moran? Moran, yes, via LibertyNation.com. Is the president a stable genius taking on the globalist empire and succeeding? Since announcing his candidacy for the highest office in the land, President Donald Trump has been accused of playing grand 4D chess. Lately, you have to wonder if the billionaire real estate mogul is not only competing in a chess match against the world, but also playing backgammon, checkers, Risk, and hungry hippos blindfolded, arms tied behind his back, and underwater without an oxygen tank. And can you spell Superman? It's kind of a humorous thing. The latest events, in the world of economics are just too connected to be a coincidence. Is Trump accidentally stumbling into these developments, or is he the stable genius taking on the empire? After months of global financial markets enduring a case of will he or won't he, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell met the White House halfway and gave the administration a quarter-point cut in interest rates at the July Federal Open Market Committee meeting, otherwise known as the FOMC. Moving forward, the target Fed funds, that new rate will be in the 2% to 2.25% rate. Despite the U.S. economy residing in the boom phase of a business cycle, Powell acknowledged that the dovish measure was a mid-cycle adjustment, adding that this is not the beginning of a series of long-term rate cuts, not at all. And he lists several other things. I want to move forward here to where we get to the Trump punchline. He says, President Trump has already suggested that he wants the Fed to emulate the European Central Bank, the ECB, meaning he desires enhanced easing, lower rates, bond buying, and other stimulus measures. It is true that the Fed's purview does not consist of interfering in exchange rates, but its policies would affect Forex markets. So turning on the printing press would debase the greenback and make its exports appear more attractive, though it would diminish Americans' purchasing power at the same time. Is this hypothesis giving the president too much credit? Perhaps. But the president has shown us that we are all cats, and he holds the laser pointer. And enraptured as we are by every tweet, announcement, and off-the-cuff remark, good or bad, he could say that all human beings are gorgeous, and that would somehow ignite an international incident and encourage millions to ask, what about extraterrestrials? Trump made the Democrat leadership stand beside far-left anti-Semites because he called out the squad. The president got the left to dismiss the reality in Baltimore, crummy, lousy city, drawing attention to just how bad it is in the Democrat-run city. He told the press he gets them to do the vetting for any name he touts. Heck, Trump even managed to persuade the Democrats to defend MS-13 after he called them animals. So it's hard to know how smart this guy is. Is he just on a string of luck? Is he a clever... Does he run his mouth in a very clever, creative fashion? Is he getting some very well thought out psychological guidance on what to say and how to trigger the sheeple into stampedes or to have them stand still? I would suggest the latter. I think he's getting some amazing guidance from some people using AI and the supercomputers to forecast, if not create, exactly how the masses will act and react as well.
Well, it's well established in the cuniverse that Trump was recruited by military intelligence to run for president. As such, that would make him a puppet. He's nothing more than a showman. He's your sales guy that's out doing the song and dance and making your sales, but it's the company behind the salesman that's doing all the work. And to my mind, that's what Trump is. He's a salesman. He's
a frontman. He's a Carney Barker, right? That's my view.
He's a barker. He's a barker. And I can't see any other way to look at him. He had a hit show for a while that makes him a very good media personality. He knows how it operates. He had until he became president, he was well liked by many, many people. And for that reason, he made a good face man. People paid attention. He had a background. He had a reputation that could be sold. And I don't see him as anything more than a really glorified sales guy.
Right.
And as for China has a poison pill that very few people ever talk about, and that is they own in the neighborhood of $1 trillion worth of U.S. bonds.
Nobody talks about it, Bernard, except that's right. Tell the audience what'll happen if China really wants to pull out all the stops here.
Well, that's the thing is if China gets really upset at how things are going, all they have to do, they don't even have to sell their entire tranche. They just have to drop a third of it, and the U.S. economy will be toast. Absolute toast. The credit rating of the U.S. will fall through the floor. The dollar will become worthless.
Yep.
Yeah, overnight. Overnight. Yep. This is huge, and China owns. They know it. That's their bargaining chip. The reason they haven't knuckled under to any of Trump's machinations is because they know all they have to do is dump a few bonds, and the U.S. is gone. It's toast. There is no U.S. economy. Because the U.S. operates, the Federal Reserve and the U.S. operate on debt. And the fact that the debt is backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. And if any of the debt owners, which the way this system works is all these central banks trade each other's debt back and forth to make it valuable. And all any of them have to do, including Japan, Germany, France, England, a lot of them own significant amounts of debt, but China owns a huge wad of U.S. debt, a significant portion.
Not a word said about it yet. They're not saying anything.
All they would have to do is say, yeah, they would just have to say that we intend to sell it, and immediately the dollar will go through the floor. And
Bernard is not exaggerating. No, that's right.
No. Nobody seems to realize that this is sitting out there, the unspoken poison pill that's just sitting there, that is China's bargaining chip. They don't need any other bargaining chips.
I agree. All right, so what else in your article should we mention here? You've got it really very well choreographed here. I like all the proofs you've offered. They're right there. It's an excellent article.
Well, I want to point out that I'm not using anything but the exact same text that all the Cuvians refer to, right. And where they see this incredibly powerful entity that is in control of everything, I see a rather malicious group, whatever it is, that is manipulating a great many people and some very powerful systems to achieve some goal that we really are not aware of, because nobody except the people operating it knows what Q is. The only thing they know is what they've been told in the Q drops, and I'm using the exact same information. I put up screenshots, so I'm not editing or manipulating the data in any way. And I'm using sources that everybody else refers to. So where I come up with these conclusions is based on the exact same information that everybody else has. So I can't see why people are getting so excited about Q, because when you read this stuff, you think, well, wait a minute, something doesn't smell quite right here.
Well, all right. Let me ask you another question. Of these 500,000 followers on one site, how many of them are bots? We don't know.
We don't know. That's the thing. If we take for granted that Q is military intel, they would have the ability to put a bunch of fake followers on any site that they choose. And there's no way of knowing, at least at our level, without doing some really deep diving and having a lot of coding experience that I don't really have. But I can't imagine there are hundreds of thousands of Q followers that do nothing but eat popcorn and watch a show. They don't have any kind of rallies. They don't have a show of power. They don't have a march in Washington. All they do is just sit around and trade information on their networks and eat popcorn and watch the show, which is what they've been told to do by Q.
Mm-hmm.
So either these hundreds of thousands of followers, some say millions, okay, whatever, either they don't exist, or they have been so effectively neutralized that they won't do anything without being given permission.
Right.
And either one is not comfortable.
No. Any indication in Q's most recent drops about post-shooting events coming up?
Well, that's the thing, is Q exclusively posts on what is known as Infinity Chan or 8chan. And that platform was deplatformed on the 1st of August, I think, or right in there, 1st or 2nd of August, just before the shootings.
Yeah.
Ostensibly because there was, too much free speech on there.
I know.
By that, whatever the reasoning, but it was deplatformed, and they're having trouble getting it back up, supposedly. So Q hasn't said anything post-shooting. Now,
not one drop.
Not one. No, not since 1 August.
Well, see, they're letting the fans thoroughly masticate and process what they've been given. So that's pretty smart, actually.
And this goes to what I've said many, many times, is that part of Q's function is what's called Q analysis. It's set theory. They are analyzing the dissemination of information and figuring out who is doing what with that information. And they're mapping networks, and they're finding out who's in and who's out, and what the growth rate is. I mean, there's hundreds of different metrics you can get from this information. And this is no big classified thing. It's done frequently by any major corporation when they do their market analysis.
Mm-hmm.
It's just more. It's hyper analysis. And to my mind, Q disappeared most of June and beginning of July to do its annual analysis. And by that I mean, if you're doing this, you have to stop putting information out. Otherwise, you risk getting a feedback loop in your data. So they stop. And what they do is go into listening mode and just pick up what the data is giving them, what the information is doing. And then it put out, 200 drops in 3 weeks?
Yeah, it was bizarre. Yeah, it was a deluge.
Yeah, including the prediction that these shootings, or at least something bad, was going to happen. And then it vanishes again. And ostensibly it is because it's deplatformed. But to me, if Q was still around, people would be demanding more information. And it's a convenient excuse that they got deplatformed. So now Q can go back into listening mode and see what people are saying about the predictions. What are they feeling? What are they doing? How are they reacting? And I'm quite convinced it'll show up again here in a short amount of time and get back into it once they finish the analysis.
Well, as usual, splendid writing, Bernard, analysis. Thank you. You can see Bernard's writing right here at Rense News. And we'll watch. Take care. Let me know if you need anything at all. You do wonderful writing. Happy to always post it.
Yeah, thank you for posting, because it's been very helpful in getting the information out. I do appreciate it.
You got it. All right. You be well. Take care.
All right. You too. Thank you.
Bernard Grover, the man, the go-to man when we have interest in analyzing Q. All right. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Hang on.